Welcome to LC Screen Talk. My name is Larry, and today we're talking why the tomato meter has gotten it so wrong this year. So this is a collaboration with Rachel Wagner, who also does movie reviews as well as movie-related content. She has a bunch of amazing videos up on her channel. So I'll have the link in the description box down below. Definitely go check it out. Plus, she is also doing her list of movies that she thinks the tomato meter got it totally wrong with. So make sure you check out her video, like, subscribe, give her some support. So for this video, I'm going to be listing movies I think that the Rotten Tomatoes score is either completely too high or completely too low. So to be considered in the underrated category, a film has to be rotten on the tomato meter, which is 59% or below. And in order to be considered in the overrated category, it has to be 60% or above. It doesn't have to be certified fresh. It just has to be fresh. And as per usual, this is my personal opinion. These are my personal lists. I know people will probably vehemently disagree with some of the movies I put on this list. And that's cool. That's awesome, actually, because movies are, in fact, subjective. So we all have our own opinions, and that's what's great about the film medium. So let's go ahead and start with the underrated category. This list was really hard for me to come up with because seemingly I've enjoyed a lot of crappy movies this year because I really disagree with so many films that have such a low score. So I just have a couple of honorable mentions. And I also have several films that have a really low Rotten Tomatoes score that I enjoyed more than the critics, and I would say probably more than the average person, but even I wouldn't be able to justify a fresh rating. So these are better than what they're given, but not really that good. So on to my 4 official picks for underrated on the tomato meter. Kicking us off is King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. I really liked King Arthur, but leaving the theater, I knew that it was not going to be all that well received by a lot, and I think there are a lot of other people out there that actually really enjoyed the film. So it has a 28% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it is the lowest scored of the films that I selected for my official list. And I can understand a lot of the complaints, but personally, I had a ton of fun with this film. I thought it was really cool, really stylized. It had that Guy Ritchie stamp on it. I thought the humor worked well, the action was fun. I just had a really good time watching King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. I don't have much other defense for it, other than personally, I thought it was pretty awesome. Up next, I have my second big, fun, popcorn blockbuster film, and that is The Great Wall. The Great Wall currently sits at 35% on the tomato meter, and going into the film, I might have even thought that seemed a bit high. But coming out of the film, I enjoyed myself quite a bit. Not only did the film shock me for not being a complete white savior dud, but it actually really celebrates Chinese culture, Chinese lore, and tales. So I thought that was a wonderful thing. Plus the world building and that army, the different colors of the uniforms, and the different ways they fought in that Chinese army were so spectacular. I think it was one of the coolest things I've actually seen in theaters so far this year. The ending battle was a little bit underwhelming, but the monsters looked cool, the army was legit, and it just was exactly what I want out of a big, dumb popcorn blockbuster. My next choice for underrated is A Cure for Wellness, which currently sits at 42% on the tomato meter. So I fully acknowledge that the third act of this film goes completely off the rails. Like, the third act of this movie gets so outlandish and so kind of crazy and ridiculous that it dampened the experience, even for me, and I liked this film. But the first 2 acts are really strong. They build tension. They build this amazing world and mythology. They create an awesome atmosphere. So I think that it builds up enough goodwill that devolving into ridiculousness is just a little bit forgivable, maybe. Plus, the cinematography is stunning. Like, so many of the shots in this film are absolutely amazing, including in that over-the-top, outlandish third act. So I think for the scope that it took, for the filmmaking prowess, and for ambition for this type of old-school, smaller-scale horror film, that alone deserves to get into that fresh rating area. So my final pick for underrated films on the tomato meter is Wilson, which is the highest rated of the 4 that I've selected at 46%, but that is shockingly low in my opinion. We are halfway through the year, and I would say Wilson is at least top 3 funniest films of the year so far. But not only was it pretty funny, it also had a ton of heart. It turned what could have been easily grating and unlikable characters into characters that had lots of layers, and you were able to sympathize with, empathize with, and understand, and end up rooting for. And I think that's a huge accomplishment. Plus, as always, Woody Harrelson gave a fantastic performance, as did pretty much everybody from Laura Dern to all the supporting cast. This one actually shocked me that it was rotten on Rotten Tomatoes. I wasn't expecting that when I left the theater and did my review. So it's kind of the definition of underrated in my book. I think it deserved better, and I think more people should seek it out. Now for overrated films. These are all fresh films on the tomato meter, and just because I place them here doesn't necessarily mean I think they should be rotten. But I definitely don't think they warrant the really high scores they have on the tomato meter. But honestly, I don't think a whole lot of films were overrated. I haven't outright disliked a lot of films this year. The first film on my overrated list is the only film on this overrated list that I didn't really like all that much, and that is Alien Covenant. Currently, Alien Covenant sits at a 71% on the tomato meter, and kind of like how I was with Wilson, I was like that with Alien, but in the reverse. I was actually shocked that it had this high of a score on the tomato meter, because frankly, it isn't even the best second-rate Alien film of the year. The entire film was, from the moment we land up through when we meet David, this would be a slam dunk, certified fresh in my opinion. However, when we meet David, it devolves into overly complicated, overly philosophical, pseudo-intellectual mess. And that was always the biggest problem with Prometheus, but I think Prometheus actually pulls off the whole creator concept better than Alien Covenant tries to. Plus, we get backstory for those xenomorphs we never needed. The beginning of this movie where we meet David's creator, no thank you. So overall, I just think there was far more bad in Alien Covenant than there was actually good. My next overrated film of the year is Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast so far is the highest grossing film, both domestically and worldwide in 2017. So how could a film that has connected with so many people and created such mania so far be overrated? Well, it currently sits at a 71% on the tomato meter. While pleasant and beautiful to look at, it just feels hollow. This remake wasn't able to capture the pure magic that the 1991 animated classic was able to capture. The character designs were just clunky, kind of hard to distinguish, and unable to emote the emotions they needed to bring. The pacing was always just a little bit off, which was hurt by jokey comedic timing being shoehorned into moments we weren't really looking for that jokey comedic moment. Plus, as a musical, it's hit or miss. I think Evermore is a nice addition to the film, and I also think the song that Maurice and Belle get to sing together is also very pleasant. However, the rest of the new songs were either bad or simply forgettable. And then when it comes to the vocalist, most all of our backup vocalists are great. Then we get to Emma Thompson doing a weird Cockney accent and unable to sing the title sake of the film all that well. And we get to Emma Watson, who needed a lot of auto-tune to get her to a respectable point. So while I think Beauty and the Beast is a perfectly fine film, it is a well-made film, I just didn't think it succeeded enough to warrant something like a 71% on the tomato meter. The third film on my list is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I know. Back-to-back fan favorites here that I just kinda went after. But Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 currently sits at 81% on the tomato meter. And while that's not in the upper echelon of the Marvel films, it's still a really, really good score on this metric. And here's the thing. I think Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is perfectly fine. It is perfectly good superhero movie as well as a blockbuster summer flick. However, I don't love Guardians of the Galaxy quite as much as everybody else does. I think I had a few more problems with it than the large majority, but I still enjoy myself. I think it's a really solid movie. But from that bar that's a little bit lower than most people's, this really took a step downward. So I don't think it's nearly as funny as the first one, and it doesn't have near the heart as the first one does. We don't get character development, and the biggest problem is that the script is a mess. Plain and simple. This movie is just all over the place. They put so many different story arcs into this movie that we're just constantly bouncing from this character to that character, and it just feels like an overactive mess in the end. We just shoehorned in so many different plot lines that we didn't really ask for and weren't all that curious about heading into the film, or ones that we knew they were trying to make happen. Star-Lord and Gamora romance that we didn't really want to happen, or doesn't actually make sense when you look at the characters. But as I said, it's enjoyable, but do I think it's an 81%? No. So my final pick for overrated film in the first half of 2017 was a really tough one to come across, because I did enjoy this film quite a bit, and that is The Lost City of Z, which currently sits at 88% on the tomato meter. And it's that ranking that really had me finalize this as my fourth and final choice, because I did enjoy The Lost City of Z. If you go back and watch my review, you'll see I gave it a good review. But ultimately, there are just too many problems in the film. There are too many problems with the story, with the flow of the story, that I think critics became blinded by an old school feeling film. It felt like old-fashioned filmmaking, and by big ambition. But unfortunately, I don't think it meets the quality of those old school movies that critics are comparing it to. And that's why I'm really curious as to how it quite got up to 88%. By no means do I think this should be rotten on the tomato meter, but I think it was judged more on what it could have been, what it strived to be, than what it actually accomplished in the final product. I think there were other films this year that strived to be something great, and maybe they didn't quite get there, but they were judged on what they delivered, and it just seems that Lost City of Z wasn't judged quite on the same metric. So those are my picks for the most overrated and most underrated movies for the first half of the year. What do you think of the movies I selected? Do you agree that any of these are over and underrated? And what are your personal picks when it comes to Rotten Tomato scores? You can either share your lists and opinions down below, or you can hit me up on Twitter. I love you all so much for your support. Mwah! Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!